everyone to be speaking to cat lovers. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. It's awesome to have you here.
So to begin with, Belinda, can you tell us about the Divine Feline, the chic cat lady's guide to the woman's best friend?
Yeah, look, with the book, what I really wanted to do was I really wanted to create a book to give people that love cats joy. I was really intrigued to discover that some women don't like to post pictures of their cats on Instagram because they're scared of being stereotyped as the crazy cat lady. And I just thought, why is it any more strange to love a cat than it is to watch sports on TV or play chess or drive motor racing cars or anything like that? Why are sort of people hounded for loving cats or considered a bit batty and a bit strange? So I really wanted to write a book that just had everything that people who love cats will really enjoy. I mean, I've got a copy of the book here. It's just beautifully presented. Yeah, as you pointed out before, the end papers are really gorgeous. The spine is velvet. It's beautifully illustrated, and it's full of the story of the history of women cats from ancient Egypt to the present time, and also my own memoirs of my life with cats. And as you were saying, like lots of tips and behavioural advice.
I actually adore, I've got the book in front of me and behind me, and I actually adore it. The illustrations are fantastic. So what was the inspiration of the illustrations, and did you have any inputs into this?
Well, I think what I love about the book is that everybody who's done their part is a cat lover. So I, the author, am a cat lover. The artist, Narelle Walker, is a cat lover. The lady who designed it with the beautiful felt spine and everything, she's a cat lover too. So it's actually a book brought together, you know, by cat lovers for cat lovers. And the artist actually, she came up with her own concept. We sort of briefed her that we wanted something that felt chic. So we're actually saying chic cat lady instead of crazy cat lady, because studies have actually shown that women who love cats are actually cultured, refined, they're upwardly mobile, they're not that sort of crazy stereotype at all. Quite often they're social, they can be married or unmarried, but usually they have a lot of interests and a happy social life as well. So far away from that stereotype of the introvert and so on. So everyone that had, you know, something to do with the book, I think just did a beautiful job of it.
And it definitely is chic, and you can see it shines throughout. And I don't know whether people have had the opportunity. I mean, look, it's just stunning. And I love the way that that they've used the ink in the colours as well, that sort of nice blue ink. And it's just different. It is chic, very, very chic.
Yeah, we really thought about sort of the books that you've read when you were a child that were like a fairy tale book. Those, you know, with a beautiful type, with a beautiful gold foil. We really wanted to produce a book that brought, not just the content brought you joy, because that's what you know, what I've written there should bring people joy, but also just the whole feel and touch of it should just make you feel like, oh, this is like you're a child again, just opening a magical book.
It brings that sort of that nostalgia, you know. It's stunning. It really does. Can I ask you a question? Well, I'm going to ask you lots of questions, but this particular questions. Do you get offended though if people describe cat ladies as the crazy cat lady, or, you know, or as the cat lady? Would you find that offensive, or would you go, I'm a proud cat woman?
Well, I am a proud cat woman, and I tend to ignore the crazy part. I'll just embrace that if that's what people want to call me. But I actually do in the book say that there's sort of a derogative term there that goes against all women, not just women who love cats. But it's sort of the idea of, if you're an independent woman, if you don't get married and have children, you're going to end up this lonely, crazy lady looking at the world through her net curtains with only her cats for company. And then you're going to die, and no one's going to know that you've died, and they'll find you 3 weeks later with your face half eaten by your ravenous cats. And it's sort of a warning against women being independent, but interesting. I think you'll like this, Michelle. There's a sort of stereotype too about librarians as well. That
I was just
like,
gonna, I was thinking.
that librarians are these sort of like, you know, mousy little ladies in cardigans who just live with their books and things like that. And that also is sort of attacking women's independence, because to be a librarian was one of the first professions, along with teaching and nursing, available to women. So again, it was independent women. So what I've tried to really show in this book is that it's not just about loving cats, but it's also about embracing our lives as women and our femininity, which cats express beautifully in so many different ways as well.
They do. Now, I was really interested when I started reading the book, how you wrote a letter to Pebbles, and you asked Pebbles, you know, the best etiquettes. And where does Pebbles come from? Because I really enjoyed, as you go through the book, you know, you've got these different people asking questions of Pebbles, and Pebbles gives some really good answers. So where did Pebbles come from?
I think Pebbles might be my alter ego in some ways. And Pebble also, because we're talking about the sort of idea of a fairy tale for adults as well.
Yeah.
Pebbles is very much like the fairy tale character, the mentor character that you get in a fairy tale, that, you know, the one that takes Alice and, you know, through Wonderland and guides her through, or the mentor that's always there looking after the fairy godmother to Cinderella or so on. And so Pebbles sort of represents that wise mentor. And Pebbles, of course, is explaining the cat world to us humans and the way that cats view things. So I thought, rather than writing a book with just boring behavioural advice, you know, like a textbook, I'd actually really open up our imaginations, and to this magical little creature from the cat world is explaining to us why cats pee on things, why it might be difficult to, you know, get two cats to get along together. He explains, you know, cat hating, and, you know, how to stop a cat from scratching your furniture and why cats do that. So I really just wanted to make it that sense of, you know, you're in this little wonderland when you read this book, but you're also getting really good practical advice at the same time.
And especially the advice that Pebbles gives about bringing a new man home, and how he should behave maybe, and what he should bring to, you know, bring to the house when he visits. So Belinda, cats have been revered through history, and they've been treated like gods. For example, in ancient Egypt times, they were like revered as mighty high divinative creatures. So can you talk about, sort of in your book you talk about, you know, there's a timeline of cats and women in the relationships. Could you talk about that too?
Yeah, look, our relationship, a lot of people don't realize our relationship with our cats goes back, you know, 4000 BC to ancient Egypt. And the cats that we have, you know, I don't know if my one's popped up yet. I'll just see. No, haven't woken in. Oh, there we go. It's coming. But the beautiful, beautiful cats that we have in our life on our couch or wherever at the moment have very closely related to the African wildcat. They really haven't changed so much. And what happened in ancient Egypt is when the Egyptians first started, you know, they changed from being nomadic farmers, so nomadic tribes, to becoming farmers. They were storing grain, and the mice and the rats would destroy the grain in a couple of days. So when the African wildcats were attracted to the granaries because of the mice and rats, the Egyptian farmers wanted to encourage them to stay around. And so they used to give the cats treats and offer them all sorts of warm beds and all sorts of things to keep the cats sticking around. So cats actually became associated with good luck, because families that had cats around, they had more food because they weren't suffering famine from the mice and rats. But the cats also protected the women and children in the home against snakes and dangerous scorpions and so on. And so the Egyptians began to associate cats with good luck and good fortune. And before long, cats were then associated with the goddesses of women and cats. And then, of course, in the Middle Ages, when you've got the rise of the church and patriarchal Christianity, they wanted to destroy the old, religion, the old pagan religions. And so they sort of began this propaganda that cats were evil, and that the women who had cats, the women who might have been the medicine women of the villages, were evil. And they began, we know about the witch hunts, and the cats and the women were burned together. But it was really sort of, cats started to make a comeback, and women really started to make a big comeback in the Victorian period, because of course we have women in the suffragette movement, but also cats became associated with good hygiene and a well-ordered home, which were Victorian ideals. And Queen Victoria was a huge cat lover, and she was instrumental in starting the RSPCA, and also, campaigning against cruelty to animals. So yeah, that's the history in a nutshell.
Yay! And the RSPCA is still going, and there's more organisations who that have gone off from that, isn't there? Who with cats and animals, looking after in specifically the welfare with that. I like the part where you write about I'm going to go back to ancient Egypt, where the cats weren't allowed to be taken out of the country, and they would go after whoever took them. They wouldn't they go after them and say it needs to come back? It was illegal to take them out of the country, right?
Yes, it was, because cats were so precious. In fact, in divorce cases in ancient times, the cats were divided up like assets. The family cats were divided, between the husband and wife. And the husband could pick his favourite cat, and the wife got the rest of the cats. So they were precious. They were considered precious, and they were considered important to the fortune of the household. And Egypt didn't want their sacred animals taken out. But of course, cats were very useful on ships, because again, they protected the store. They also kept, sailors company. And so sailors were always trying to sneak these magical creatures out of Egypt. And that's actually how the cat went abroad. It was on ships with sailors, countries that were trading with Egypt, like Greece and so on.
And wasn't it you wrote about in the Middle Ages with the witches, where they got rid of the cats, and the result of that was plague. And so the knock-on effect of cats being around or not being around is quite devastating, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of the times we think that cats are just lazy things that sit on a couch. But cats have really influenced human civilization. It would have been very difficult for the ancient Egyptians to become farmers if they couldn't store grain. And also, it would be difficult to export produce if they didn't have cats on ships. And cats have been on ships for ages. They're still on ships. Quite a few cats are on naval ships, and so they protected the stores. But the story that I found really interesting was the mighty Roman army used to walk around with cats. Used to, go through countries with cats to protect their weapons, because the weapons were made from sinews and other fibers, and the rats could attack the weapons as well. Oh. So the cats became associated with success in warfare, because you don't want to be out to fight a battle and your bow doesn't work or something.
No.
So cats have really influenced us. And as you said, with the plague, because of the Middle Ages, so many cats were destroyed. The rat was the vector of for the flea that passed the plague. So, cats were definitely an important form of rodent control that, was one of the reasons that there were so many rats in Europe at that time.
Now, what I liked about your book as well, talking about ships, is, and I don't know what page it's on. I'll bring up Emily Bronte because she's opened up, but you have little snippets about, so Emily Bronte here with her cat and her relationship with hers, but you have one with Flinders
Yes.
in here as well, and I don't know what page that's on. I think it's further down. It's quite, isn't it towards the beginning of the book?
Just one moment. I have a cat that's.
Oh, it's going to come and. Oh, here we go, everybody. There's Flinders.
Gucci.
Hi, Gucci.
Isn't he beautiful? He's being a little bit naughty at the moment because when he's not getting attention, he knows how to get attention. But we might talk about that later, cats and attention. But there is actually in the book, what I really loved to do was to actually pick out some historic characters and to show their relationship with their cats. And I think my favourite historic character was probably Mark Twain, because Mark Twain was the ultimate cat man, I think, because he loved cats so much, and he had 19 at any one time. But when he was traveling around on his book tours, he missed his cats. He couldn't travel around with his cats. So he used to rent cats in whatever town he was in. And when he left that town, he would leave money for the lifetime care of those cats when he moved on. And also when his cat Bambino went missing for a while, he penned this beautiful poetic lost cat notice. And but fortunately Bambino came back on his own.
That was good. But and I like that about you. But you had Florence Nightingale and her relationship, and Zsa Zsa Gabor, and all these people, Emily Bronte, and it was just lovely then just to have them bits of information, and that was what I think is lovely about you. But you've got all this sort of snippets of information and wisdom and things going on there. So Belinda, can you tell me when did you first realize that you had a special sort of connection and relationship with cats?
Well, I think my first relationship was with a battle-scarred tomcat named Snuggy, who actually belonged to my neighbours. He was, I lived in a suburb that still, had orchards and things like that. And we were next door to a farmhouse, and he was basically a farm cat that was, expected to catch rats and things like that. And so he had sort of scars all over his body and a torn ear from his battle with other tomcats. But I was like 4 years old when I first encountered him. And I just thought he was the most magical creature, and I just loved him. And I used to write all my little stories about him, and I used to tell everyone about him. And when I had to go to school, I cried because I was going to be separated from him. All the other children were crying because they were going to be separated from their mums, but I was crying because I was going to be separated from Snuggy. But eventually the neighbour was actually going to get rid of him, and I ran away with him under the house and hid with him. And, my parents were saying, Belinda, don't you want a little kitten or something like that? And I was like, no. Snuggy. And so they actually negotiated with my neighbours that I could keep Snuggy. And I just still remember that feeling that I felt as a child. It was like all my Christmases had come at once. It was just this rush of life is so good and so magical, and my greatest wish has come true. And he was a cat that wasn't quite used to humans, but he was always gentle with me as a child. And I think then I realized I did have a special bond.
An affinity with them, really, isn't it? It's that sort of and I love the story. I think, did you describe Mr. Snuggy as the love of your life?
Yes. As a child, look, I actually married him as a child. I actually created my own wedding ceremony to marry him because I just adored him. I absolutely adored him. I had two brothers who I liked very much, but I was a bit younger than them, and so they were already at school. I was, on my own a lot until they came home from school. And, he was really my company. Yeah.
And didn't you take him to school? Didn't you?
No, I didn't. I didn't take him to school. I took one of my mother's hats to school because I couldn't bear to be parted from Snuggy. And I convinced the other children that it was actually a cat as well, which just shows you that, kids have amazing imagination.
I remember that because I believe you got into a little bit of trouble.
I did. Yeah.
It's quite cute. But sadly, you did lose him, and and that was really, really sad. And I read the story about that, and it you know, and it does bring a tear to your eye, you know, a little girl and losing your first pet because it's your love, and then you know, your first loss, and it's the first experience for a lot of children, the first experience of death, isn't it? And that can be quite a hard thing, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think it really, you know, it sounds, and we were talking earlier before we started the talk about how cats and other companion animals really influence our lives in very deep ways. And I think people that love animals, whether it's a cat or a dog or any other animal, horse, sheep, it is a special bond that you have. It's like a special, I think people that understand animals and love animals have a deeper, more enriched understanding of life. And I think we do have that connection with nature through them. And I do remember when I lost Snuggie when he passed away, it was a tremendous shock to me as a child because I hadn't, you know, experienced any loss. But also in a way, it was something that prepared me probably more gently for adult life and the acceptance of the loss that we have, you know, in this life. It's something that we accept and that we still have to love and carry on. So I think in that way, it was more a gift, I would say. I would say it was more, although of course I was very sad at the time, it was a deeper understanding of life and that life is precious.
Yeah, and it was, I remember as well reading the part where you were living overseas and you were, you know, you were living in an apartment and there was a cat in the apartment, and then at some point you decided to go home and settle at home because you actually wanted to have your cats and be somewhere where there was, you know, the outdoors and whatnot. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, well, when I was living in New York, that's when I wrote my first book, White Gardenia. And my roommate in New York had these two beautiful cats, and she was at work during the day, and so they would come, you know, to be with me for company. And so I basically wrote that book with these two gorgeous cats. But when it became time for me to move back to Australia, my heart broke to leave these cats. Of course I couldn't take them, they're her cats, her darlings. But I remember it was quite an emotional moment. I actually felt, I mean, I liked my roommate very much, but I probably felt sadder about leaving the cats than I did about her. But when I came back to Australia, at that point in my life, I'd always been traveling and I never owned more than I could fit into 2 suitcases. It was sort of my philosophy that if you owned more than that, you would have to settle down. You'd be stopped from that freedom of traveling. And sort of when I came back to Australia, I just somehow felt it, and I got an offer on the book White Gardenia, and so I was more or less going to have to knuckle down and write the next book that was contracted as well. And so I really decided it was time to settle down. And when most people decide to settle down, they think it's time to get married. But I thought, well, it's time to get some cats of my own. So I did get beautiful Lilac and Gardenia, who kept me company through finishing White Gardenia, Wild Lavender, Silver Wattle, Tuscan Rose, Golden Earrings, Sapphire Skies. And then when I got to Southern Ruby, they were already old ladies. And in that book, I think there's a sense of sadness and loss. And that is, I knew they were getting old and that they would soon pass away, but I knew that I would miss them terribly. And so I think my animals, and I point this out in the book, they've always played a part in my writing as well. They've always been my companions when I'm writing, and how I feel about them is often weaved into my novels as well.
And I think you mentioned that, don't you, in the book, how, I don't know which cat it was, but one of them had an air of grace or whatever, and you sort of put that into one of your characters as well, and the relationship of
that was Gardenia, and Gardenia had like a Mae West personality. She was like pure Hollywood. She was the one that had to have attention, and she was like, the confident movie star. And her sister I liken more to Audrey Hepburn. She was more petite and sort of graceful and so on. And so Gardenia did influence my character of Natalia Azarova in Sapphire Skies, because she's got a huge personality and a feisty personality. So, you know, sometimes I'm asked where my ideas for characters come from, and sometimes they do come from animals as well. Like, they come from everywhere. But my animals have definitely influenced my writing in so many ways. Which is why, again, I was fascinated by writers like Charles Dickens and Mark Twain and Emily Bronte, and wanted to include stories of their cats in there, in how they included it in their writing, because I think that, you know, writers and artists might be more influenced by their animals than we realise.
Yeah, and I love how you write about, I don't know which one again, but one of them, you'd have guests come in and she'd walk to the door and just show herself and, you know, stand and kind of, I'm here.
Yeah, she actually did the perfect entrance. And I don't know where she got that, and that just shows that they have their own personalities. But she used to, if we had a party or guests over, she used to stand in the doorway until everyone went silent and looked at her and said, "Oh, what a beautiful cat." And only then would she walk in when all the eyes were going to turn to her. She definitely had that down pat, and she used to astound me with confidence.
I think that's just fantastic. Do you think that you had an influence on the personalities, or do you think that sort of just they've got their own personalities and they develop themselves?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really interesting point, Michelle, because I have now 3 brother cats, and Lilac and Gardenia were 2 sister cats. And these cats have all had the same upbringing, being given exactly the same amount of love, exactly the same environment, but they all do have different personalities, which is what's given me so much respect for them. But what I think about that is so funny, because we don't really influence their personalities. They have their own personalities. And that's why I sort of say cat people and dog people, I'm sure, are the same. We can all share pictures of our cats forever, and there's never any jealousy or any competition, because we know we're not responsible for how they've turned out. But I think people showing pictures of their children, it's nice at first, but after a while it becomes tiresome, or it becomes competitive, because they actually reflect us. Do you know what I mean? Whereas cats, we have no responsibility for how our cats are. They just are how they are. And so I think that's an extra reason that we enjoy them so much.
Yeah, I must admit, I think I prefer sharing the dogs rather than the children.
Yeah.
They do a lot more funny things, and they don't mind if you share pictures of them.
Yeah.
The children mind. But
well, one of the things that I think is really hilarious is when I'm going through my Instagram account, quite often I'll see you can get your cat's picture put on socks, or you can get your cat's picture put on a bed cover. And I thought that, you know, that sounds appealing. But if you said you want a picture of your spouse's head on the bed cover, or your spouse's head on all your socks or on a t-shirt, that would be really weird. That would be a crazy husband lady then.
But aren't our pets cuter, to be fair?
They are cuter, but also I think the reason why we love our animals so much is that they represent an uncomplicated kind of love. Like, no matter how much we love our families and our children and our siblings and so on, they bring complications with them. Whereas our relationships with our animals are so much more straightforward. And I think that's really why we feel comfortable and relaxed, and we enjoy them so much. I'm quite curious to wonder how they view us. Like, whether they go, "Oh, my relationship with my human is so complicated."
Yeah. That would be nice to get into their heads, wouldn't it? A bit like the dog on the Up cartoon where he can talk. It'd be nice to know what they were, ball, you know.
Well,
interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, one of the interesting things that came out when I was researching the book comes from cat behaviourists. And they actually say that dogs can actually recognize humans as separate to them, as a separate species. They actually recognize that humans are not dogs. So they actually behave differently with other dogs to they do around their humans. But cats actually view us as other cats, but just bigger and perhaps clumsier because we can't gracefully run along a fence or something like that, or jump up onto a cupboard with any skill. But that's you know, we were talking earlier about training animals.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I do point out in the book, that cats can be trained, but you go about it a different way to the way that you go about it with a dog. Because with a cat, you're really the cat mother. And if you look at kittens with the cat mother, they're always crawling over her and they always want her attention. And cats are the same with us. They actually do want our attention. And that's why sometimes they're naughty, because they get a reaction. For instance, if they jump up on the kitchen counter and you come running and go, no, 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 and take them off, they think, wow, I got some attention from mummy.
I'll do that again.
I'll do it again. And that's why cat owners quite often find themselves, they take the cat off the counter, the cat jumps back on the counter because the cat thinks this is wonderful, it's attention. So I tell people to, you know, break a cat out of that habit, have a stool near the cat, you know, the kitchen counter. And when the cat jumps on the counter, place it on the stool and then give it lots of attention on the stool. Tell it it's a wonderful cat, brush it, give it a treat. And every time it, you know, jumps on the stool instead of the counter, praise the cat, give it a treat, brush it. And eventually it will train out of jumping on the counter. So that's really how you deal with cats being naughty.
I like that idea. Yeah, I do. I quite like that. I try it with my dog when he's jumping up, put him somewhere else. So, Belinda, you hear stories about cats saving people or being kind of a guardian angel. Do you think there's such a thing as cat's intuition?
Well, I think what's really interesting about cats and why they've often been associated with magic is that they can hear things that we can't hear. And one of the things I love to watch my cats do is one ear stays in this direction while the other one scans the room. And I thought that'd be a great gift at a cocktail party. You could listen to one conversation and then hear what was going on. But their whiskers actually can sense different air currents. And of course, they have the most sensitive noses. And so there's a cat in a nursing home in the States called Oscar, who when somebody is about to pass away in that nursing home, he goes and sits on the bed and curls up to them. And the doctors say he's more accurate at predicting an impending death than the doctors are themselves. Sometimes the doctors will think a patient is all right, but Oscar will go and sit and cuddle up to that patient. And so Oscar obviously is sensing something that human beings just aren't. Whether it's a stronger sense of smell or a slight change in a person's breathing, he's picking that up. And so I think in a sense that's probably he's closer to nature and he's closer to picking up things. And intuition for a human is our gut feeling too. And quite often we destroy it with our own logic. And as we know, cats have very little logic. So I'd say that their intuition is probably pretty good.
Yeah. And the other thing I was going to ask about cat magic, because there's been a long association with magic and cats and women, of course. So I'd love to hear about cat magic. And I was reading about how cats can relieve stress in humans, and then there's certain things like you were saying about if a whisker falls out and you know you have the whisker, you put it on your computer or wherever, it brings you luck, but you can't pull it out and all that kind of thing. Do you want to speak about that a bit? Because I was really intrigued with all that.
Yeah, look, cats have a long association with magic, and I think my take on that and what we can learn from cats about magic, and it's actually quite scientific, it's no longer just superstition, is that a cat's mind is pretty much in the present moment. They're not thinking, they're not worrying about tomorrow too much. They might be thinking, when is my owner coming home so I get some food and some cuddles? But their minds aren't far into the future as ours can do. And they're not thinking about their past. They're not thinking, oh, when I was a child, somebody called me a nasty name or something like that. They may have learned things in the past. So their minds are like pretty much in the present, which is why scolding them for something they did 2 hours ago doesn't work, because they don't remember whatever it was that they did. And now modern psychology is telling us that when our minds are too much in the future, too much in the past, all over the place, our brain is electrically firing off erratically. We can't think straight. We feel stressed all the time. We have a lot of anxiety. And so we're starting a lot of mindfulness practice. And they're actually finding when we're mindful and our minds are in the present moment, our brain waves go in a very coherent pattern. Our heart starts to beat in a very coherent pattern. And we start to produce around us an electric field of calmness, not just our own body, but around us. And it gives us this feeling of being joyous in life. We make better decisions. We're more loving. We're more kind. So that's really what magic feels like. We really are in the moment and life feels good. Life feels magical. We're not worried. And I think that's where our cats' minds are most of the time. They're in this magical world of the present moment. And so I do think if we can learn that from our cats and can practice it ourselves, we probably will experience more synchronicities, more joy, more flow with other people, less problems, and definitely less stress.
Because the purring motion of a cat, if you sat with your cat and it's purring, it's actually, it's quite tranquil, isn't it? And it just it's just a lovely calming sound, isn't it, that you kind of just brings you down. And if you've had a bad day, it's quite lovely, isn't it, to have that. Just that work the other way around. So, you know, kind of the stress of a human make a cat more stressed out itself and more anxious.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think one of the things that cats are so sensitive in particular, and all animals will feel this, but you probably noticed that animals that are neurotic usually have quite neurotic owners as well. So they are picking up on that, because basically you're their carer and they trust you and they look to you for guidance. And if you're all erratic and over the place, then they feel scared and nervous, just as children pick that up as well. And so I think, yes, it's important for us to be calm. If our cat is anxious, then we might have to look at ourselves and our own behavior of how we go about doing things and whether we're making our cats anxious that way too. And I actually just point out a very good tip for modern life, because we were saying earlier cats are living indoors these days, is that we now tend to live in open plan homes. And if you do have a cat that's showing anxiety and you have an open plan home and you have a lot of people moving around, a really good way to solve that anxiety is just to give the cat a little hiding spot, because cats just need their alone time every so often. So if they can have like I've got a basket on the top of a cupboard, it's just a really nice hideaway place. They can go up and feel safe. Or if you want to put a box under a desk or something, just so they can have a little bit of peace and quiet and they don't feel that they're always out in the open. Because you have to remember, in the wild, they're preyed on by other animals. So they would normally need a place to hide and to feel safe. And if they're constantly out in the open, that can add to their stress factor.
And you demonstrate, especially with the 3 boys, you rescued them, and you demonstrate the way that you worked with them and took it slowly and sort of, you know, steady to actually be calm with them and to, you know, slowly get them to be less anxious about being human world cats rather than being, you know, they were feral cats, right?
Yeah, because it's really quite often you'll hear people say, oh, cats are aloof and unfriendly and so on. And it's not so much that cats are that. It comes back to the fact that they're prey animals and they're small animals. and their territory is very important to them. They have to know that this territory, this home is safe. And once they realize that they're safe, they'll bond with you and they'll be very friendly and they'll be very affectionate. So they may not be like a dog that will run up to a stranger, you know, first meeting. Cats really have to work out, is this person safe? Am I safe with this person? And once they've worked that out, they'll be really loving and affectionate. So I always say, especially with cats, fast is slow and slow is fast. If you go slowly with your cat at its pace, you let it come to you, let it feel comfortable with you first, then you'll eventually find that you've got this really strong bond with the cat. But I don't know if you remember, if you were a child, if you had a neighbour or an auntie that used to squeeze you, like used to run up to you and put kisses on you and grab your cheek and stuff like that. And you used to go as a child, you used to just freeze and you wanted to just run away from this auntie.
Yeah.
And that's how your cat feels if you do that to them without them knowing that you're safe and knowing that they, I mean, I can do that to my cats now because they actually know that I'm safe and it's fun and that they can trust me. So it's just that way. Think about a cat when you're approaching it. Just let it approach you. Let it see that you're safe. Let it watch you for a little bit. I love children who are so intelligent with animals that they don't run and grab the animal. I've seen children do the beautiful thing of just sitting down and letting the animal come to them. And I think a lot of us adults should maybe learn that as well.
Yeah. In your book, there's a family, isn't there, with a couple of children who come along, and they did exactly that. They didn't run up, they didn't do the squeeze thing. They were quite sort of respectful of the cat and you know, not doing that, which was quite lovely to read in there. I like that. So your boys, I love the names, and it's quite funny reading the story about the names, and when you rescued them and you took one of them to the vet and you said the name and they look at you kind of like, what? So can you tell everyone what made you call your cats Versace, Gucci and Valentina?
Yeah, they were these boys that I have were actually rescued from a car park. They were living with their mother and grandmother and some other cats in, you know, not good conditions. And I just knew if they stayed there, they were just going to keep breeding. And I was a carer with wires at the time, so I had access to humane possum traps. So I actually had to trap them, and I took them to a vet in the countryside and got them desexed, and then I put them through finishing school so that they could find them homes. And of course I kept Valentino, Versace and Gucci. But the reason why they ended up with such pretentious names was because when I got them desexed, the receptionist there just wanted to call them World League Cat 1 and World League Cat 2. And I thought, no, I want these cats to have homes. I want them to go from this terrible situation into a beautiful life. So I gave them very, very pretentious names, and just, you know, with the idea that they would grow into them. And they really have. They're really beautiful boys.
And it just goes to show you can take your feral cat, and your feral cat can become quite the gentleman. Which is quite nice to hear, because people can dismiss them quite easily. So it's nice that you've actually been able to achieve that with your cats. And
yeah, look, everyone told me I was crazy. Nobody told me it was a good idea.
But it is a good idea. I think
it's a good idea.
Yeah.
And very fortunately, I did make contact with the World League for the protection of animals, and Helena Thompson. I mean, you really need somebody who knows what they're doing to show you what to do. Because they were frightened cats, and cats that are unsocialized have had to defend themselves. So they can actually be quite wild, and they can be quite vicious. And Gucci, who I picked up earlier, when I rescued him, he was extremely vicious. He wasn't a cat for the you know, light-hearted. He was really faint-hearted. I mean, he really took some work to get him to be a happy house cat. But I think with patience and time, just animals can really respond to that. And I think that was a huge lesson. And a lot of the vets that I saw also learned from that, because they'd learned at vet school of a cat's not, you know, rescued when it's a kitten, there's no hope for it. But the eldest cat was the grandma. She was already 3, and the mother was already a year or 2 years old, and they turned into beautiful cats as well. It just took time, and it just took those special people, not the people that have to grab a cat the first time that they see it, but the people that can just be very patient with a cat, and they all became beautiful cats in the end.
And it was lovely reading about Helena. I think her part in the, you know, in looking after cats is amazing in the work that she does. And she's quite an older lady, right?
Yeah.
And how many cats does she currently have at her house?
She's got 30. She's got a cat sanctuary, and she lives in a semi-rural area, but the adoption centre, the World League adoption centres in Bladesville, and they probably have about 30 cats there as well. And I really am so happy to be their patron, because they are an organisation that is all run by volunteers. There's no CEO driving around in a Mercedes-Benz or anything like that. Everything goes towards helping animals, and they help all animals, but they have an adoption centre for cats, because there are so many cats living on the street, and usually their fate is to be rounded up and gassed, or, you know, meet with cruel people, and they don't live long anyway, because it's such a hard life. And so the fact that they do so much rescue, and they also, we were talking earlier about people that maybe have gone into palliative care or had to go into a nursing home, they do rescue cats from those situations and try and rehome them. But it is really hard work, and it takes exceptional people to do it. And Helena has definitely been my mentor in the cat world, and she is an exceptional person.
And it was lovely to read that, and it was lovely to actually read that, you know, the friends that you've made through that as well, and the tips that you give if you want to be a volunteer. You know, only volunteer what you can volunteer. Don't, you know, try and give it your all and burn out. Just do what you can do, and it can be the smallest thing, the slightest thing. So, you know, it's well worth, I think, having a little look at or what was it called, the World League for the Protection of Animals, and it's a no-kill policy. Would that be right?
Yes, no-kill policy.
Yeah, because we want to home them. So now you've got your cats. How do you feel about cats now living indoors? Of course, your cats are indoors, and the work that, you know, we're trying to do to keep our cats housed inside rather than out in the environment.
Yeah, look, I think that's a good move. I think that's a good, because as you know, I've been a wildlife carer as well as a cat lover. And, you know, here in Ku-ring-gai, we live in a beautiful wildlife area. And cats can be quite devastating on animals that are already pressured by human habitation, the loss of their land, motor vehicle accidents and so on. So I think as cat owners, if we can reduce that by keeping our cats indoors or in enclosures, that's important. But also, it actually is much better for the cat. Indoor cats live much longer than outdoor cats. They're not exposed to diseases. They won't be hit by a car. Of course, we have the dreadful paralysis tick in this area. Even when you take precautions, it can still kill your cat very quickly. So, but also, I think cats that are indoors bond more closely with their owners, because they really do rely on you for company. And so when you bring a cat indoors, I think the important thing is to remember that cat still has psychological needs. So to play with your cats, which can actually be quite fun, because they need to express that hunting instinct. You don't want them to become sort of fat, bored things sitting on the couch all the time. So one of the tips that I give in my book that helps me keep my cats fit is I don't just plunk their food down in front of them. I make them chase me around the house. I hold the plate of food and I run around and they chase me. So they get to do a bit of a hunt for their food. And
you've got to work for it.
Yeah, they've got to work for it. So I think all of that kind of thing. And again, I've got like beds, you know, on top of a cupboard. I've got a couple of cat scratches for them. And if you provide a nice environment like that, I think that is the best way for us to go, especially in wildlife areas. Yeah, like Ku-ring-gai.
I agree. Now, what we're going to do now is, shall we ask if there's any questions? I can see that there's 2 there. I'm just going to open that up for a second. Oh, Joanne Potter, she's from Wanborough, and she says, does a cat know if you're not a cat person at heart? And that is a really good question, Joanne Potter.
Joanne, I wish we need Pebbles here to answer that one for us. But I think cats do pick up our energy and our sense of things, but they also have their own personalities as well. So one cat may shy away from someone that they know is not a cat person. But for instance, my Gardenia, she didn't care if you were not a cat person or not. She was going to climb all over you and sit on your lap until you gave her some attention. So I think, you know, if somebody's giving a negative vibe, they'll definitely pick that up. But whether they'll care or not about it is totally dependent on your cat's personality.
I think they can read you, but I definitely think that Joanne is a cat person, because her daughter actually decided she wanted a cat, and it's called Pigeon, and it does go and sit on Joanne, and Joanne tells lovely stories about this cat. So yeah, I think you're a cat person, Jo. She was going to get a dog, but she got a cat instead. So Belinda, do you think there's any more cat stories in the future?
Well, I think so. Like, I'm continuing on with Pebbles in my newsletter, which people can subscribe to from my website. But he's continuing to give advice. His advice this month is whether you should dress your cat as a Christmas elf or not. So, and yeah, so he's continuing on with that. We'll see. You know, I think I'll always love cats. I actually love all animals. Although, you know, cats are the animals that I've bonded with and I have as my companions. I actually love every animal. There isn't an animal I really don't like. I even quite like snakes. I've never owned one and probably wouldn't own one, but I don't mind them as well. Not the venomous. Well, I don't hate the venomous sort. I just don't want to be around the venomous sort. Yeah, so we'll see. But there's definitely plenty of books. I'm sure my fiction publisher will be going, no more cat books, Belinda. We're waiting for the next novel.
Yeah, that's true. Although I think Pebbles would be a very good children's character.
I think so.
I think Pebbles could give some really good advice to the children about how to look after the cats, and you know, the what not to do, and maybe the adventures they could get up to. I think that would be something fun to write about.
One of my readers actually wrote to me and said, could we have a book about Pebbles giving us advice about life? Like, not just about cats, but wouldn't it be nice to have a book by Pebbles just giving us all sorts of advice, like how to get along with a difficult neighbour, or what to do when your sister's trying to sabotage your wedding, or all these sorts of things. So yeah, we might see more Pebbles in the future. But if people don't get enough Pebbles from the book, they can definitely subscribe to my newsletter to get more Pebbles.
And I love Pebbles. And lastly, your research process. Can you tell us about that before we go? Because it's always interesting to know where you get all your information from when you're writing your books.
Well, this I think would have to be an ad for Ku-ring-gai Library, because one of my first sources of information is my local library. And I do have to say, look, I grew up in Turramurra. So that library, my mother used to take me there, you know, when I was a child. And I used to borrow not just on my own card, but her card as well. And so I know the local library very, very well. And the librarians are amazing people. If you need to find out information, it's amazing that they can think of where you could find that information. And I love that stack at Gordon, because I, especially for my historical novels that I write, I can find books there that people haven't read since the 1920s, and you know, the dear librarians can always fish them out for me. So I just think it's an awesome library, and because it's one of the older libraries in Sydney, it's particularly good for me and writing historical fiction.
Well, Belinda, we'd just really like to thank you for joining us tonight. It's been beautiful, and as part of the celebration of one of the oldest libraries, I think it's one of the oldest libraries in the Metropolitan of Sydney. We're celebrating 75 years. Ta-da! We've had these beautiful bags made and there's a gift inside. So what I shall do with this one, I'm going to send it to your local library, and maybe somebody or yourself next time you pop in to get your books can collect that for you.
Oh, awesome.
And that's a special gift for you, just to say thank you. We really appreciate that you've come and spoken with us tonight. It's been delightful. I'd like to know, are there any more questions? Oh, I've got, what is your next writing project?
Oh, my next writing project will be another mystery story, as we were talking about. That was my latest novel that came out just in September, and that's got a good reception. So I'll be working on, it won't be a continuation of this novel, it'll be a completely separate story, but it will be another story set in Australia with another sort of Australian Gothic theme to it as well. So yes, I'll be cracking on with that straight after Christmas. So
fantastic.
It's been a busy year for me.
It has, and of course, the Mystery Woman, we watched you through, it was through Hornsby Library, but it was part of the New South Wales Reads campaign with all the different libraries, which was lovely. And thank you for sharing that as well, because it's been a great resource and it's been a really difficult year, and we're just trying to work out how we can best, have our authors visit us and reach out to the public. So it's been really great. So hopefully we'll see you in the flesh next year when you've got your new novel, and maybe we'll see you when you visit the library. That would be really lovely. So we've come to an end now. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us tonight? We've been chatting exactly an hour.
Oh well,
we could go on and on and on. I'm sorry. I have to say, guys, I read this, and I love animals, but I have dogs, but I so enjoyed this book. And you're reading through, and there's some heartfelt stories in there, and it's beautiful. And you share so much of yourself in there, and it's just beautiful. And I love the tips. If you're gonna get a cat, most definitely this is the book to get, because it'll give you all the advice, all the spiritual advice. Everything is there. And if you get a feral cat, you've got that too. You know how to treat it and how to sort of look after it and welcome it into your family. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. And it's also a lovely gift for a cat lover. If you know somebody that loves cats,
definitely.
It really only needs a ribbon on it, because it's just so beautifully presented.
Actually, I was in Novella in Ku-ring-gai, and they had them all out, and it was on the countertop, and it just was beautiful.
Novella is a beautiful store, and for everyone that's local online, we can highly recommend going to Novella, because if you don't know what you want to read next, the stuff is so good.
Good. As good as the library. I'm not sure they can find as much information as the library. I love bookshops though.
Oh, both. Well, I think you need both, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Definitely stuff you can find in the library that you'll never find in a bookstore.
Yeah, there's a few hidden gems. There is a few hidden gems. So thank you everybody for joining us. I can't speak now. Joining us this evening. It was really lovely to have you here with us. Belinda, you're the last author for the year. So thank you, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. I'll be in touch, and I'll leave this at Toramura for you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye everyone. See you later.
Have a nice evening.
Thanks, Belinda.